The saxophone is great. Bowie's over-sweet, strong vibrato on the sax to me works extremely well, and it's just a great vibe. There's a great feel to it, and I think the whole band were very, very good at that kind of style, that kind of is it a send-up or isn't it? You know, you're never sure whether he's dead serious about it or whether he's completely tongue-in-cheek.
Driving Saturday, it's a driving Saturday, it's a driving Saturday, it's a yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir.
Pin-Ups was an interesting album. These days, covers are de rigueur. Everyone does it. They do covers albums, covers EPs. They do covers all the time. Back in the mid-70s, it was almost unheard of.
I mean, it's a good album, but what is it? It's an album of cover songs. There was a story once that somebody asked Bowie about why did he do that album, and he said, "Oh, I did the album because the band were bored and needed something to do, so he blamed us for it." When actually, I always remember going around to a hotel in London, and he was playing me all the songs that he was going to do on the album, and I knew nothing about it.
Pin-Ups from 1973. It's arguable as to whether or not it was a wise career move. A lot of die-hard fans, my son included, who's the biggest Bowie fan in the whole world, just don't like the album, full stop.
I think Pin-Ups was probably really the only option at the time, because we'd been basically working more or less non-stop for a couple of years. You know, we'd had like Christmas Day off, and that was about it. So the luxury of sitting at home like he did in the early days and just write wasn't really there. He wrote some on the road and on the bus sometimes, but there wasn't like another album's worth written.
It was an album he thought he was pressurised, I think. You know, when record companies, he's got big success, they want another album. And I don't think he had the songs. He'd been out on the road touring, and I don't really think he had the material. I don't think he had the direction, where to go, or anything. And I think it was, how can I fill this gap quick?
Pin-Ups is an interesting album, but it's certainly, creatively, it's not one of the most interesting in Bowie's career by any stretch of the imagination. There's some great moments on there, some great songs, but you know, at the end of the day, it is a Bowie album, but it's not an album of Bowie songs.
There was obviously an album was needed by a record company or whatever, and that was the obvious choice, really. Some of the tracks I think worked, others would have been better left. Most of them.
It was all stuff from his era going down the Marquee, all the bands he saw on the Marquee. Right. And he picked some great songs, but it wasn't a Bowie album. It was a cover version album. And the last thing people want when you're riding on the high of Ziggy and Aladdin Sane is for him to come out and do a cover album. You know, they want new material.
Bowie is very much his own man, always has been. So you couldn't argue, for example, that it was a stopgap, that he wasn't writing material and he needed to put an album out. I think I would tend to be generous in thought and say that he genuinely wanted to pay tribute to these tracks and these artists, and he did the best job that he could.
We'd always talked about doing an album of our favourite tracks, but it was more a whim, more a, ooh, wouldn't it be quite nice to do that? And I think the trials and tribulations of being on the road and not being able to just consistently sit at home and write got him to a point where he didn't have much written.
Diamond Dogs was a little bit of a patchy album. It was coming towards the end of a certain era for Bowie. And you sometimes got the feeling at that point that Bowie allowed things to go on slightly too long. Later on in his career, he'd be very ruthless in terms of, right, I don't want to do another album like this because I've done everything I want to do in that area. Heroes and Low, for instance. He could have done a third album because I think everyone was fascinated by where he'd go. No, I've done it. I don't need to do anything more because I can't top Heroes.
Many people think that Diamond Dogs was a bit of a disappointment, and I have to put my hand on my heart and say I think yes, it was. I think he'd fired the Spiders from Mars. Goodness knows why. One hastens to guess why he would have broken up such a successful format.
It was desperate. It was a desperate album in content, but I thought it was incredible in setting a whole scene up of desperateness and the 1984 approach. I think it was brilliant in that context.
I was gutted when he parted company with the Spiders from Mars at this time, because they'd made such great music. The title track is interesting enough. Certainly Bowie showed that a lot of the bizarre ideas did in fact come from him, because they're present on this album. But then there are some weak moments. I mean, Rock and Roll With Me, quite frankly, is duff. I think it's a really duff track.
I think Diamond Dogs definitely suffers from that lack of band cohesion. Maybe the songs also were a bit ambitious. They're very themed, very much around the whole 1984 George Orwell thing. So, maybe it was a bit too conceptual.
I think it stretched audiences just a little bit too much in the image of it and the content. It's probably up to that point, the stretching was just enough that they could actually tolerate. It stretched them, but it didn't overstretch. And I think Diamond Dogs just pulled it a little bit into the, not sure if we want to go there, is my opinion.
The album was originally conceived as a concept album based on George Orwell's 1984, and the song 1984 is actually one of my favourites from that particular album. But I would hasten to add that it did have a great single on it, but which was Rebel Rebel, of course. But generally speaking, to most people, I think it was a bit of a disappointment. But hey, the guy made some great albums. I think you're entitled to one that's not quite 100%.
Rebel Rebel, in some respects, was a rewrite of Gene Genie to me. He was repeating himself a little bit, which is something Bowie rarely did and has rarely done since. It's a good single. It's got the obvious build-up. It's a rock and roll song. It's got the chorus.
Some people have accused him of kind of rewriting the Gene Genie with Rebel Rebel, which I just think is very harsh. It's a classic Bowie single, one of the best riffs Ronson ever wrote.
Of course, Rebel Rebel was the big hit single from Diamond Dogs, and was it as good as previous singles? As a song, I think absolutely. I think it was great. That wonderful riff from D to E, I think it was used on a commercial for jeans or something or other. I remember it being used, I know Gene Genie was, but I think Rebel Rebel was used in a commercial as well.
To me, it's the guitar playing. It's just the big sort of the big rock riff. Down, 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 down. It oozes classy rock.